Story 1. The Fireworks That Never Came. I've never really liked New Year's Eve. The whole countdown, the noise, the forced celebration, it just never clicked with me. But in 2019, I decided to do something different. My best friend Brian had moved to a remote mountain cabin a few months earlier, a place his uncle had left him in his will. It was isolated, deep in the Catskills, but Brian loved the solitude. When he invited me and our other friend Jamie to spend the new year there, just the three of us, away from everything, I thought, why not? We arrived on December 30th. The road to the cabin was long and winding, with barely any signage. The GPS lost signal about 20 minutes before we actually arrived. When we finally got there, the place looked like something out of a movie. 2 stories, old timber walls, a stone chimney with smoke curling out, and snow falling in a quiet, picture-perfect way. It wasn't until night fell that things started to feel different. On New Year's Eve, we planned to start a bonfire, have some drinks, and maybe light a few fireworks at midnight. We spent most of the day collecting dry wood and hiking the trail behind the cabin. By dusk, the forest had taken on a strange silence, the kind where even the birds seemed to disappear. Jamie joked that it felt like something out of the Blair Witch Project, and we all laughed, trying to shake the weird feeling. But the tension started ramping up as soon as the sun dipped below the trees. Around 9 p.m., we were sitting by the fire pit outside, bundled in coats, waiting for the water to boil inside for cocoa. The snow had picked up again, falling in thick, lazy flakes. I remember Brian freezing mid-sentence and staring toward the tree line. Jamie and I turned to look and saw nothing, just the dense blackness between the pines. "I swear I just saw someone," Brian whispered. "Over there, in the woods." We laughed it off. "You're paranoid," Jamie said. But Brian wasn't laughing. "I'm serious. He was just standing there, watching us." I got up and aimed my phone flashlight in the direction he pointed. Nothing, just trees and falling snow. We let it go, but the mood had clearly shifted. Brian was jumpy. Jamie was uneasy. I tried to keep things light, but a part of me started scanning the dark, just in case. At 11:30, we went inside to warm up and prep the fireworks. Brian had bought a bunch from a roadside stand and was giddy like a kid, loading them into a crate by the door. That's when the power cut out. Just like that. Darkness, no wind-up, no flickering. 1 second we had light, and the next we didn't. Brian cursed and grabbed a flashlight. "It's probably the breaker," he said. Jamie followed him to the basement. I stayed in the living room, lighting a few candles and trying not to panic. That's when I heard it, something scraping against the side of the cabin. It wasn't a tree branch. It was slow, rhythmic, like nails or claws dragging along the wood. I stood frozen, listening. Then it happened again, on the opposite wall. Brian and Jamie came running back up, breathless. "The breaker's fine," Jamie said. "Everything down there looks normal. The power just stopped." We all stood in silence for a moment. Then Brian locked the front and back doors, without a word. Midnight came and went without fireworks. None of us were in the mood anymore. The power never came back on, and the scraping sounds continued, sometimes circling the cabin, sometimes stopping altogether. It was worse not knowing when it would come back. We barely slept. Jamie passed out on the couch with a knife under his pillow. Brian sat upright in a chair, holding a flashlight and a fire poker. I tried to rest, but kept waking up to the feeling of being watched. At 4:13 a.m., I finally lost it. I stood up and shouted, "Whoever's out there, screw off!" The echo of my voice disappeared into the trees. That's when the fireworks crate exploded. Not just a pop, an explosion. The window nearest the front door shattered inward as the heat and force from the blast rocked the cabin. We hit the floor, ears ringing, as sparks and fire burst through the gap. The porch was on fire, and the snow around it was melting rapidly. We scrambled for the back door and ran barefoot into the snow, our breath steaming in the freezing air. We didn't stop running until we hit the truck, parked just down the trail. Brian peeled out of the drive, headlights sweeping across the trees. That's when I saw them. 3 figures, dressed in dark winter gear, standing completely still just beyond the porch fire. Not firefighters, not neighbors, just watching. We never went back for the cabin. The local fire department said it was probably a gas leak that caused the fireworks to ignite. But we know what we saw, and we know what we heard. The sounds, the power outage, the figures in the dark, they weren't random. Someone had been there, maybe for hours, maybe all day, watching, waiting. We don't celebrate New Year's anymore. Story 2, The Last Call. There's something about small towns that unsettles me. Maybe it's the way they seem so peaceful on the surface, but hide secrets no outsider could ever guess. My New Year's Eve in 2018 made sure I never forgot that lesson. I was driving back from my cousin's place after an early dinner in a tiny town called Ash Hollow, somewhere deep in rural Iowa. I had to get back to Des Moines before midnight because of work the next morning, and honestly, I didn't want to get caught up in any small town New Year's festivities anyway. It was about 9:30 p.m. when I pulled out onto the main highway, a narrow 2-lane road surrounded by endless fields and the occasional line of trees. Snow blanketed the ground, and the sky hung low and gray, swallowing what little moonlight there was. About 30 minutes into the drive, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was a text from my boss, reminding me to check the morning shift schedule. I shouldn't have looked, but I did, and in that moment of distraction, I hit something hard. The car jolted. I slammed the brakes, heart hammering. I thought maybe it was an animal, a deer or a coyote, but when I got out there was nothing there. No blood, no fur, nothing. Just a dent in my front bumper and a weird feeling crawling up my spine. I shook it off. Iowa roads were notorious for bad potholes hidden under snow. Probably just that, I told myself. I got back into the car, cranked the heater, and started driving again. That's when the phone rang. No caller ID. Against my better judgment, I answered. A voice, a man's voice, came through, but it was distorted, crackling like a bad radio signal. I could barely make out the words, but what I did hear chilled me. Turn around. Don't make it worse. I pulled the phone away and stared at it like it had just grown teeth. Static buzzed in my ear before the call cut off completely. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, my fingers trembling. Every instinct screamed at me to just keep driving. So I did. I pressed harder on the gas, trying not to look at the empty fields around me, trying not to think about how utterly alone I was. Not even 10 minutes later, I passed a bar, the only building I'd seen for miles. It had a crooked neon sign that just said, "Last Call," flickering weakly in the cold. I slowed down automatically. Some part of me thought maybe I could stop, call the police, tell someone about the weird call. But something about that place made my skin crawl. The parking lot was full, way too full for a bar this far out. Every car was parked haphazardly, covered in snow like they hadn't moved in days. Yet the lights were on inside, and through the front window, I could see dozens of people just standing there. Not drinking, not talking, just standing. All of them were facing the window, facing me. I hit the gas so hard my tires spun for a second before I shot down the road again. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if any of them had come outside. The highway twisted through more dark woods and open fields. Snow began to fall again, thick and heavy. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Every mile felt like 10. My heart wouldn't stop hammering in my chest. That's when the headlights appeared behind me. At first, I thought it was just another late-night traveler, but they got closer and closer. High beams on, blinding me through my rearview mirror. I switched lanes. They switched lanes too. I sped up. They matched me. My mind was racing. Maybe it was just a drunk driver from that creepy bar, I thought desperately. Maybe they were just trying to mess with me. But then the car behind me started flashing its lights. On, off, rapidly, like a signal, like a warning. Another call came through. No caller ID. This time I didn't answer. I just kept driving. The pursuing car pulled up alongside me, window rolled down. I glanced over and froze. The driver wore a black mask, the kind you see in old robbery movies. And he was pointing at something. Not at me, at the road ahead. I turned forward and slammed the brakes just in time to avoid a huge tree that had been felled across the road, almost invisible under the snow. If I hadn't stopped, I would have crashed full speed into it. My tires skidded wildly. The car came to a shuddering stop just inches from the trunk. Breathing hard, I watched as the masked driver sped past me without another glance, disappearing into the storm. I sat there shaking for a good minute, trying to figure out what had just happened. Eventually, I maneuvered around the fallen tree and kept driving. I didn't see any more cars. I didn't get any more calls. I made it home just after midnight, shaking, exhausted, and more confused than ever. I never found out who was behind the calls, or the bar full of silent people, or the masked driver who maybe, somehow saved my life. I still don't know if they were trying to warn me, or lure me into something even worse. All I know is, I've never traveled alone on New Year's Eve again, and I never will. The Midnight Guest. When you grow up in a small coastal town like I did, you learn early that the ocean keeps secrets, and so do the people who live near it. It was New Year's Eve 2020, and the world was still in chaos from the pandemic. There were no big parties that year, no fireworks. Most people stayed home, locked in their houses, quietly waiting for the year to end. I figured it would be the most uneventful New Year's Eve of my life. I was wrong. My friend Ellie had invited me to her family's beach house for a quarantine-safe New Year's. Just her boyfriend Mason, and me. No crowds, no craziness. Just a few drinks, board games, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. It sounded perfect. The beach house was old, sitting on a rocky bluff that overlooked a strip of frozen sand. In the summer, the place would have been buzzing with tourists. But in winter, it was dead. Only the locals stayed, and even they tended to vanish indoors once darkness fell. The three of us spent most of the evening indoors by the fireplace, eating chips and playing old card games. It wasn't exciting, but it was comfortable. Safe. Around 11:30 p.m., we bundled up and decided to walk down to the beach to watch the ocean when the clock struck midnight. It was dark, so dark that the waves looked like black ink rolling against the shore. The wind was sharp and bitter, whipping at our coats and faces. We brought flashlights, but they barely pierced the mist rising off the cold sand. I remember glancing up at the house from the beach. From that distance, it looked like a tiny, lonely thing perched at the edge of the world. At about 5 minutes to midnight, Mason noticed it first. "There's someone by the house," he said, voice tight. We turned and looked. At first, I thought he was seeing things. But then, in the faint glow from the porch light, we all saw it. A figure, standing completely still at the bottom of the porch steps, too far away to make out details, but close enough that we knew it wasn't one of us. "Maybe it's just a neighbor," Ellie said, but she didn't sound convinced. The beach houses were spaced out, and the nearest neighbor lived a quarter-mile away. We stood frozen, watching. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't say anything, just stood there. Midnight came. Somewhere in the distance, we heard the faint crack of a firework, lonely and misplaced against the dead quiet of the coast. The figure turned and started walking toward us. Not running, just walking. Slow and deliberate. I don't know what instinct kicked in, but all three of us turned and bolted down the beach, flashlights swinging wildly as we ran. The sand made it harder. Every step felt like we were dragging weights, but adrenaline kept us moving. I didn't dare look back. Ellie stumbled once, and Mason grabbed her by the arm, pulling her up. We ran until we reached a rocky outcropping that jutted into the sea, a dead end. Trapped. I turned around, heart pounding so hard I thought I might faint. But there was no one behind us. The beach was empty. The mist rolled along the sand like ghostly tendrils, but no figure was in sight. We waited, breathless, backs pressed against the cold rock, expecting at any moment to see them emerge from the mist. But the beach remained silent. After what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, we crept back toward the house. No sign of anyone. No footprints except our own. No cars parked nearby. Nothing. When we got back to the porch, the front door was wide open. We knew we had locked it when we left. Inside, nothing seemed missing. Nothing seemed broken. But the three of us felt it. Something had been there. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the living room with every light on, flinching at every creak and groan of the old house. In the morning, Mason found something on the porch. A single, old-fashioned brass key. No note, no explanation. Just a heavy, cold key lying where the figure had been standing. We still don't know who it belonged to. We never found any tracks, and when Ellie asked the local sheriff about it the next day, he just shrugged and said, "Strangers sometimes wander in from the sea. Best to keep your doors locked." It was the way he said it, as if he knew exactly what we had seen, that kept me awake for many nights after. I haven't been back to the coast since. And if you ever find yourself near an empty beach house on New Year's Eve, stay inside. Whatever's out there isn't coming to wish you a happy new year.